Solicitor. Okay, everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Right. So, hello, Beverley, and
Hello.
welcome.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me to be the guest on your inaugural Kinship Cafe. I look forward to coming to visit you again in the future.
And you're very, very welcome, as many times as you wish. Well, Beverley is our special guest tonight, and I've known Beverley for a few years, and I find she is my inspiration. And once you hear her story tonight, I'm sure she'll be your inspiration too. So just like to say, how are you, Beverley? Let's start off.
I am very good. And as I said to you before, I'm on annual leave and completely forgot that I had promised to come along tonight. And so when I got your WhatsApp, had it been anybody else after spending the day working and doing all sorts of things, I would have sent I'm ever so sorry, but I couldn't do that to you and your guests. So here I am.
Thank you. And you do look relaxed, I must say. And thank you for coming. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself, such as where you were born?
Okay. Well, I was 60 years old, as you know. I was 60 in May, turned the big 60, which was a major achievement. I was born in Jamaica. And I came to this country in November 1965 when I was 4 years old.
Well, happy birthday, happy 60th. She doesn't look 60, does she? If I could look like that well, actually, yeah. Like that. Okay, where did you grow up?
We've always lived in South London. We lived in South London. We rented somewhere in West Norwood, and then my parents bought their property and my grandparents bought their property. And we live near the Oval Cricket Ground. So, you know, when you see everybody playing at the old Oval as opposed to Old Trafford, when they roar because somebody has scored or whatever they do, I can hear it in every room in my house.
Wow, so you're that close.
Yeah.
Right, what people don't know about you is that you were or are a kinship child.
I still am, yes.
Yep. So Beverley was raised in Kinship Care. How did you become a kinship child?
Okay, well, when my mother got pregnant, clearly I was an accident, but they say I was a very good accident. And so when my mother gave birth to me, she was 16 and my father was 17. His family wanted him to become a doctor and they were not best pleased, to say the least. And they believed that the relationship should come to an end and he should go off and study and do what was necessary. My grandmother owned properties and my grandfather was a police officer, and they were not best pleased that their only child was being discarded by other people. And so they said, fine, you know, go to hell and we will look after our grandchild and we want nothing more to do with the situation. My dad and my mother had other ideas. And so after I was born, I went to live with my grandparents and my mum still lived at home. But unbeknown to them, my mother and father continued to go out together. And despite everybody saying that it wasn't a good idea, what most people don't realize is that it wasn't until they decided to have my brother 2 years later that it came out that we've always been together and we want to stay together. At which point they got married and they spent nearly 40 years together before my dad died.
Wow.
But it was weird because I already lived with my grandparents. And so when I got to 5, there was a big family meeting. I didn't know what it was about, but my grandparents came and said to me, if you want to go home, you can go home. We really want you to stay here, but we want you to be happy and go home. And you've got your little brother you can play with. And I thought, I've got a fancy bedroom. I've got all of the toys in the world. And you want me to go and live with that smelly boy? I said, no, not doing it. And what do you mean go home? This is my home. And I told my mum and dad, and they said, fine, you know, because I used to go to their house weekends. We used to go on holiday together. There was no animosity between the parents or whatever. And so to me, go home, that's weird because it's not my home. I live here. And it wasn't till many, many years later when I had my own child, I realized how crushed my parents were when I told them that. But
Oh,
God bless them, they never ever said a word. They just said, no, that's fine. It's up to you. Nothing changes and it's fine. But could you imagine your child saying, I don't want to go home with you. I'm happy here. And, you know, they just smiled and accepted it. And I said later on that that really shows when somebody loves you, because no matter who they are, no matter what relationship they have with you, they actually put your feelings first.
hmm. So did you have a good relationship, and did everybody have a good relationship?
They did, but when I got older, I realized that there was a strain, especially for my mum, because as far as my mum was concerned, hi, Julie.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Lovely to see you.
I'm good.
As far as my mum was concerned, I was her daughter, her firstborn, and she wanted us to be really close. And it was a weird thing that she had given me to her mum because she believed that they were the best people to care for me. But I think there was an element of jealousy. And because she was so grateful to her parents, she couldn't really voice it. So I think it took more of a toll on her than it did with my dad.
Hmm.
Yeah, so she always said it's okay, it's okay. And it wasn't until she got a lot older and we spent time together, you know, in the last 5 years when she got the cancer and I looked after her before she died, and we had proper conversations, and she said, you know, I love you. She said, she said to me once, don't ever tell your brother and sisters this, they would feel so mortified. She said, but you've always been my favorite, and it's always upset me that you're the one that I wasn't responsible for. I didn't grow you up and I didn't teach you things that came from my parents. But yet, if I wanted anybody to say that's my child, she said, you're not supposed to choose between your children, but I would always choose you.
Oh, how lovely.
Yeah.
It is
And
lovely.
I remember when she got her degree and I helped her to get her degree, and she gave her little speech when we went to the cathedral when they accepted their degree, and she said, oh, I'd like to say thank you to my mentor, and it was me. And she said I couldn't do anything without my daughter, and lots of people wouldn't have understood it unless they knew what we'd actually been through, how important that was.
Oh, that's so lovely. How'd you get on with your siblings, your brother and your sister, while you were in separate houses? What was
It was fine. It was fine because they always came to our house, but it was everybody else asking, what do you mean that's your brother and sister? Why do they come down at weekends? And when you get to secondary school and you want to go out with your friends and you say, I'm going to my parents' house this weekend, so I won't be around. And people just thought it was weird. We've never thought it was weird because that was our lives. But the most unusual thing was other people's perceptions of it. I was once told when I was at secondary school, first year in secondary school, and we had parents' evening, and my grandparents came down, and somebody said to me, I thought you said your mum was young. And I said, yes, she is. And they said, oh, you're only making it up because you're ashamed that your grandparents are older. But when I was born, my grandparents were 40. So they weren't that old. When I was 11, my grand was 51. My granddad was 55. But they actually preferred to think that I'd made it up and I'd lied. So one day I asked my mum to come to school. Really pathetic. At the age of 13, my mum came and picked me up from school. She was only 29 and she blew their socks off. She looked fantastic. I said, that's my mother. Yes, because I was always a small fat kid, so I didn't have the glamour gene, but I didn't get it from her. So I got her to come to school and so show people this really is my mother.
Well, I do see you looking glamorous anyway, so you must have got something from her. So what did it feel like growing up in a separate household to your siblings and your parents? I mean, you were obviously very secure, because you talk about it so level-headed.
Well, with my grandparents, especially when you get to teenage angst or you don't get your own way and all the rest of it, I used to always, and I'm sure the children that you look after will feel like this, nobody had me and had to put up with me. These people chose me. They changed their whole lives just to have me. And people have always said to me that I always seem to be very self-assured and confident. Basically, I was a sport brat. They never spoilt me, as in I got lots of things because I was the only one that lived with them, and because they were older, they had more financially. But it was the fact that somebody loved me and they wanted me, and they always said, and I guess because my mother got pregnant so early and then she became a housewife and then she had a job as opposed to what they wanted for her, which was a profession. And so because I always wanted to be a professional from the age of 5, I said, I know what I want to do. And they supported me and they encouraged me. And there wasn't anything too hard for them. It was a case of if she wants it and if she's prepared to work for it, then that's what she'll do. And I grew up thinking, I remember my granddad, he was really, really a lovely man. And what he used to do is every night he used to come home from work and he used to say to me, and what are you proud of today? He said, every morning you've got to get up and you've got to think, I've got an opportunity to make a difference today. And I mean, lots of young parents wouldn't think that. You wouldn't have the time or the headspace. But no. He used to say to me, think of something. He said, I spend my days with people who I meet them at the worst time of their lives, or they've caused the worst time of somebody else's life. And he said, but even in those experiences, somebody can still make a difference. So from when I was little, it was walking down the road and seeing what we used to call like a tramp, somebody sitting outside the train station. And I used to go up and say, hello, how are you today? And I adopted this man that used to sit outside our local train station. He said I was the only person that used to speak to him. But then there was something else I used to do that later on I found out was illegal. Oops. If I saw a traffic warden put a ticket on somebody's car, I used to remove it and say that's going to ruin their day. So I would be coming home from school and I would be taking off the parking tickets because I thought that's going to make somebody upset, because when my mummy or my daddy gets one, I know upset they are. So I used to just take them off and put them down the drain.
Right. Did you ever get caught?
Well, I once told my nan what I did, and she told me somebody like Granddad will come and arrest you if you do that. And I never did it again. But I wasn't doing it to be rude. I really thought I was trying to help people. So that's when she reported me to my granddad. So when he used to come in the evenings before I went to bed, he always used to say to me, and what did you do to make yourself proud today? And then I would tell him, I've smiled at somebody, I helped somebody in school, I was nice to somebody, and no more traffic tickets.
No. Well done. Oh, well, if that's the worst thing you've done, well done. Can we move on to school, because we're going to talk about your future aspirations in a second. So what was it like for you as a kinship child with a close relationship? You've touched on your 13-year-old friends. What was it like going through school, college, and then university, being a kinship child?
It was strange in that people, this was like in the 70s, and people didn't have, unless lots of people did it, but there wasn't a name for it. So people thought it was weird that you didn't live with your parents, you know, and it was like, well, you know, did they die, you know, or did they fall out, whatever. I think the biggest thing was for people is that there wasn't the drama. We hadn't had the sort of catalytic moment that caused the problems. And in most people's situations, it is something, whether the parents got mental health, whether somebody's died, somebody's got an addiction or whatever. There are still lots of people that it will be because of their young age, they were unsuitable to parent. With my grandparents and eventually my dad's parents, it was because they anticipated that this was going to be a problem, and the problem never came to fruition. So then people always think, well, why didn't you just turn it around? And we had that situation because when I got to 12, my grandparents said to me, look, if you've decided that you want to stay with us, we could just adopt you, because we do realize that people are always asking these questions. And automatically I said no, because I know who my mum and dad are. And as much as I love you, I would feel really disloyal if I agreed to change my name to your name and sort of like push them out of the picture completely. And when I think back on it now, that was a realization on my part that I had somebody else's feelings to deal with. Because as a child, you're used to everybody pandering and sorting you out. And my grandson always said to me that you were old before you were born, because automatically I needed to defend my parents. And my grandparents accepted it and it was fine. But ever since I was little and all through secondary school and on to university, my friends' nicknames for me, which my friend Pat gave me, is Justice, because I'm the one that's always saying, that's not fair. We've got to do this and you can't do that. You've got to think of other people's feelings. And that's because when I was 5 and my granddad said to me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be a lawyer. And he said, you could start an argument in an empty room and probably win it. And you talk so much, you've got to make money out of it. And I've never wavered. And lots of people used to say to me, oh, yes, 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 but you know, you will want to do this, but most people don't do what they want to do.
We've frozen. Am I still on? Yeah. We're just waiting for Beverley to catch up. She's buffering. Very interesting, isn't she?
Oh, I love Beverley. I could listen to her for hours. I really could.
I wonder when she'll realise that we're actually not talking to her.
Exactly. I think it'll take a couple of minutes.
I'm just going to continue running.
Sort of the perspective from the child, because like when she says, you know, that sense of loyalty to parents, even, I mean, we've got that sort of issue where we think, oh, you know, the negative side of it, but whereas children always have this loyalty towards the parents.
Yes, yes.
They're respected in some sort of sense.
And that's come through. Thank you, Beverley, for coming back.
No, I'm sorry. I was sitting there thinking you'd frozen and I realised the internet dropped out, which is very rare for me.
Yeah, it's happening. It's happening here too. Sorry, so can we go back? So you knew where you wanted to go into
Since
law.
I was 5, I said I wanted to be a solicitor because my brother is 4 years younger than me. No, my brother Michael is 2 years younger than me, and then Patrick's 2 years after him. But the thing is that Patrick was always quite quiet. Michael's very boisterous and he just gets on and does things. Patrick was very quiet, and I always found myself defending him. Okay, you don't talk to my brother like that, you don't do this. And like they tease me and say he was my handbag. Okay, everywhere I went, he went. And I felt I had to look after him. And after a few years, if you see my brother and I, you will see why it's changed. My brother Patrick is 6'4", and he used to have his own business. He is a personal protections officer. So he worked for Chase Manhattan and he worked for various other banks, and he travels all around. Well, he used to. He travels all around the world with the directors, and he could break your neck with 2 fingers. But yet he's my little brother.
Yes.
Yes. But just recently during lockdown, he had a stroke. And so he's currently in a brain rehabilitation centre. So I've been backwards and forwards up and down the motorway because he lives in Coventry. So we don't know how he can't run his business and he can't go back to work as a result of it because he's got brain damage. So that's another thing I'm trying to sort out.
Well, we send him our very, very best and our prayers.
Thank you.
You talk about being a solicitor, but we haven't talked about what area of law did you go into, and we know why you wanted to do it. So what area of law did you go into?
Well, when you start off, do it back in the day when I did it, it was in the 80s. So you had to do your articles and you had to do a complete rota of the different areas. And so they found, because of my argumentative nature, that I was good at criminal law. And also because I lived down the road from Kennington Police Station. So as the trainee, you were required to go to the police station when the partners were at home in bed. And so I got quite a reputation at Kennington Police Station because I used to stroll in there at 12 o'clock at night. They had one of my clients, and the custody sergeant, Tom, was so lovely. And he said, "Oh my God, it's Miss NFA. Right, we might as well just let the prisoner out." And for those of you that don't know, NFA means no further action, because if I had to get out of bed and drive down there, it was not going to be for rubbish. But when we started, when you do criminal law, you've got to do a set of cases to qualify as a duty solicitor. And it was 12 cases, and I got up to 11. And the time was running out because you have to do it within a particular amount of months. And so I just said, look, I'll take the phone, I'll do all the emergency calls, and we've got to get this done. We were decorating our house and I'd gone to bed. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and about 1:15, the phone rang. And they said, "Oh, Miss Campbell, we've got a client." And normally I would have said, "No, phone the next duty solicitor because I'm so tired." But I had to get this accreditation. So I said, "No, I'll come down." So I'm driving and I've got the phone on loudspeaker and I'm trying to find out what's going on. It was a particular client of mine who frequented Waterloo Station on a daily basis and was very friendly with alcohol. And they said that my client had stolen a Mini. And I said, "A Mini? Are you joking? That man can't drive. He can't even walk straight, right? How could he have stolen a Mini? He would never have done that." You know, this was a gentleman that used to come to our office and I would give him lunch because he was out on his luck, lived nowhere. He would never have stolen a Mini. And when I got there, I saw transport police instead of proper police, even though they'd come to the station. And they said that he had stolen a Mini Micra. And I said, "What's that?" "An umbrella from Boots, from the concourse of Boots." And so what he'd done, when I went into the cell and I said, "Why did you do this, Brian?" He said, "Beverley, it was pouring with rain." He said, "So I walked to the front of Boots and I picked it up and I said, 'Look at this.' And he said, I pushed it down the front of my trousers and then I walked away." So of course they grabbed me. And he said, "But I've had a good dinner and it's warm here and they're keeping me for the rest of the night." So I went out and I said, "Well, clearly my client's so inebriated, we can't, question him. It would be inappropriate, much less illegal. And by the time he wakes up in the morning, do you really mean to tell me you're going to take taxpayers' money to try and prosecute a man, which he didn't actually steal it? He concealed it upon his person." And I qualified because even though it was a pathetic case, what I did find was an area of law that was appropriate to say, can an inebriated or a patient suffering from mental health issues consent to an adult caution? Because they said, just let him take a caution, we'll let him out. I don't want him let out because it's cold and he's tired. So no, he can't consent to a caution. But it is a valued point in law that you can't get somebody who is suffering from a mental health illness or is drunk or under the influence of drugs to consent to an adult caution. So we got away with it and I was accredited. But it's always been family law. It's always been family law for me. And so even though I did criminal and they tried to persuade me to continue in that, it was always about families.
So what made you move into family law? Because this is how I know you.
Well, you don't move into it. It's part of your cycle. You've got to do it. So you do like housing law, which I said no way, wasn't interested in housing law or immigration. And so they said, because I did so much criminal law and they thought I was quite good at it, they said you can do your family, which was my first choice, and then bump up the rest with the criminal. And then I did a bit of mental health because mental health impinged on both family and criminal law, because lots of clients go through criminal law because they have mental health issues, and lots of them started off by family situations. You will have people as a result of a divorce, they have a nervous breakdown, or there's something going on in the family which then leads them to go through drinks and drugs issues, and it's all encumbered from family. And I've always thought the family situation is the most insignificant. It affects every area of your life, because even if you are having a hard time, if you have a base, you will have people to care for you, and yet you could be a millionaire and you don't have anybody that loves you, and you can still feel like slashing your wrists. It is people that count, and those closest to you. If you can name one or two people that would check on you if they hadn't heard from you, or would want to know that you're okay, then you've got a chance. You keep going.
So what made you focus on kinship? Because this is where we are today. You're a lawyer and a solicitor, and you're in family law. Why kinship?
Well, when you start family law as a trainee, you do the divorces. And I've had people who have approached me for a divorce. I remember one woman came and she said she was a dental hygienist, and her husband always left the top of the toothpaste and never put the little individual thingies on the toothbrushes. And it drove her crazy. And yet she said this was the reason she wanted a divorce. And I thought, I could just say, go away, silly woman. But clearly she wasn't happy, neither was he. And so you have to put your thinking hat on, and you have to think outside the box. So basically, I did a petition based on the fact that if it was something so small, and the person who promised to love and support her for the rest of her life couldn't care less, then that would undermine her as a person, and it would undermine the relationship, and she got her divorce. But after a while, you think, well, I'm only doing that to get to where I want to be. And so you go through the divorces, and you go through the ancillary relief where people are arguing about money and property. And none of that gave me any satisfaction. The domestic violence cases, always, I used to specialize in those. And as a result of that, it's also me always wanting to protect people. But when it came to children, that's my big thing, that children need to be prioritized. They need to be provided for, and they need to feel safe. And it always comes back to how safe I felt with my parents and with my grandparents. And as much as I loved my parents, I would say hands down every day, the best thing they ever did was to let my grandparents look after me. And nothing, my brother and sister, they're all, my sister's a director of adult services, and they've all done really, really well. But I just feel for myself that I got the best quality of life by being with my grandparents. They were older, they were more considerate, they listened to me. It wasn't a case of do as I say. It was always, well, how do you feel about this? And what do you think about that? They inspired me to have my own thoughts. And even if I did anything that was wrong, I remember I really messed up once. And my granddad, he came home, and I thought, oh God, I'm going to get it. And he said, are you proud of yourself? Can you tell me, if you look at what you did, if you can justify it and you can show me why you believe it was a good thing, then that's fine. I haven't got a word to say. Now, I'd really messed up. There was no good thing in it. But he wouldn't shout and create, even though he was a very powerful man and he could have done. But it reduced me to tears, because I couldn't justify it. There was no justification. And also, I thought, he's disappointed in me. And to me, it's a perception that you have. You want to do well for the people that you love, because they love you. And therefore, it inspires you to do better. And so with family law, you look at it, and when it's to do with children, that's why I went into childcare as opposed to doing the divorces and the money. It's because it's the things that you have a problem and it brings you to solicitors or to court or whatever, but it's the planning and the investigation and the proper assessments that you do then that makes a difference to how that child's life is going to turn out in 10 or 15 years' time. So I would go to court with parents, and in private practice, I had a pretty good record. We used to do the percentages, and I could get up to 96% of cases I would win, i.e. parents get their children or they got a successful outcome. But you would get those people that came along and you knew that this was a loser, but you can't look at that as a loser because you're talking about a child's life. And you're talking about their family and how they're going to go on. And so you automatically start thinking, if you do this properly, that child can get looked after and that parent doesn't feel like they're a complete failure, because there is a feeling that if you think, oh, well, I've messed up and I've done rubbish this time, you're going to go off and try and improve it. And so you may there be one of these people that every single year since then, you have another baby in an attempt to prove to others that, yes, I can have a kid and I can keep it. And then you get the situations where you've gone through, like, before they did the protocol and the proceedings rules, care proceedings went on for years. My longest care proceedings lasted for 2.5 years. We were under Judge Crichton. And he was so fantastic, and he worked and he worked and he worked with us, and my client kept her child, and it was only because the efforts that had been put in there. But it costs so much for the human emotions, the taxpayers' money, and also for the child to be in limbo for all that time. So when they did the pre-proceedings and everything went down to 26 weeks, you will have families that come along and you get a feeling that somebody wants this over and done with. They know they're failing. They know that they are not able to properly care for the child. But rather than say it, they feel that they're doing something bad to say that I'm not a good parent. So they want children's services to take the child away, which then means that they can say, oh, I was robbed. They took away my child. I didn't do anything wrong, you know. And you stand beside these people in court, and when the judge says we're making a care order, it's almost like they were waiting to exhale. Well, there's nothing more I can do about it now. It wasn't my fault. And you understand that. And it's when you get people like that to begin with, you spend the 6 months preparing them so that when that day comes, they have been a part of arranging where that child goes next, because they knew that child wasn't going to stay with them. So it's a case of taking out the blame and taking out the shame and seeing them as a human being that has had a life tragedy. But what lots of people don't understand is when it comes to these proceedings, the Children Act of 1989 says it is the child that is paramount. So yes, you are supposed to care, and yes, you are supposed to support, but the adults are sort of moved around like chess pieces very often, because it's the child that the court has got to focus on. That's what the law says they've got to do. And people think you're hard-hearted and you're not very nice, but you have to keep telling them it's about the child, it's not about us.
Yeah. And a lot of carers here that I can look at absolutely agree with what you say. We've got a few that are in and out of court at the moment, and it is the child's at the center of everything. And yeah, I think we all agree with that, definitely.
But you see, the kinship carers will understand because they have seen it. Because very often, in order to be getting these children, you're talking about a loved one, your daughter, your son, or a niece or nephew, and you've seen their plight, and you understand and you care and you want the best for them. But you've got to understand that they are an adult, and you can tell them what to do to get the best out of their lives. And they might say, it's up to me, I'm an adult. So you've got to prioritize keeping that child safe while that adult works through their issues. And some of them come through it successfully, and, you know, orders are discharged and children go back home. But that still doesn't mean that you don't continue to care and be a significant part of their lives.
Totally agree. Would you, I know it's sort of, we've gone above time.
It's all right.
I'm not saying that you talk too much.
Well, you know this. If I was charging by the word, I'd be a millionaire by now.
We are interested, very interested. So I'd like to finish with, what are you doing currently? Just to sum up your life story, really, because we know that you're a kinship child and you've grown up and you've gone into family law and very successful and a good voice. And we'd like to finish off with, what are you currently doing now?
Okay, come September, I will have been at the Family Rights Group for 14 years. And the reason I went there is basically, I care for my grandmother. She's now 96. She had a stroke when I was 17. And then when my granddad died, I've continued to care for her on my own for about 40 years. And in 2008, my gran had another stroke. My mother was diagnosed with cancer. And basically, I was working 8 days a week in private practice. And I thought, I can't do this anymore because I've got a child, my daughter's got a heart condition. And I thought, basically, I wanted to jump off the top of our building. I was at work and I got into the lift and I didn't realize I hadn't pressed the button and they were doing some work. We went up to the top of the building, and I've never had a suicidal thought in my life, but I stood on the top of the building and I thought, how much can one person do? You know, if I fell off the railings now, they'd all have to get on with it. And then the man came and said to me, oh, you better go back downstairs, love. And I walked into my senior solicitor's office and she said, oh, were you okay? And you know me, Enza, I'll always say, oh, yes. And I said, no, I'm not. And I sat in Santesh's office and I started to cry. I'd known this woman for about 10 years. She had never seen me cry. And she got up and she said, I don't do feelings. Let me find somebody to help you. And I came home and I just thought I'd had enough. So I said, I want to leave. And bless them, they all got together and they said, you've worked so hard and you've done so well. Why don't we work it so we'll make you redundant? And then you can stay at home for a while on the money and just have a rest and look after your family, which is what I decided to do. And I'd been having a rest for about 4 weeks and I saw an advert for Family Rights Group. And even though I was a solicitor, I had never heard of them before. And so I did a bit of investigating and I applied, and the rest is history. And I've loved working there because you get an opportunity to see people and try and help them before your secretary knocks on your door on a Monday morning and say, oh, these people have got to be in court, like in 2 hours. So it's trying to prevent rather than cure. And then I've been doing training, and then I took on the position of family participation officer. I'm the only one that's ever done it. And it came out of an idea that Kathy and I had, and I've been running with it ever since.
And that's how we met all those years ago.
So I look after a parents panel and a kinship carers panel. So if anybody would like to join, have a word with Enza and you're more than welcome. And also, while I'm here, I'll give a shout out. If anybody hasn't been involved with the independent review of childcare, social care, then you're welcome to join. I'm doing a large focus group on the 15th of September from 11 till 2.
I've booked in from there.
Yes, I've gone through since I was here. I've looked through my emails. But can I just ask, is there anything anybody would like to ask me? And then I won't take over your meeting. I'll clear off.
That's fine. You can stay. Have we got any questions for Beverley? She's been very thorough.
I've bored them all to death.
No, you haven't.
I just want to hear more of your stories, Beverley.
Oh, that's the point. Work related. 6th of September, Grandparents' Day.
That's
okay.
Right.
And so we had sent out an email about grandparents, and we said if any of the kinship carers wanted to do a blog, an audio or whatever, because I think what's important is, yes, a celebration of Grandparents' Day is great, but what my focus always is that what about the grandparents that are doing the job of mum and dad? You know, your unsung heroes, because yes, you are nanny and granddad, but you're 24 hours a day and not just weekends and holidays. So I wrote a quick little poem, which I sent to Enza, about the grandparents that work from day to night, looking after the grandchildren, and how significant and important it is for this country and those in professional positions to recognize you all and actually have your back, because it's all very well. I'm a nanny and I've got a nearly 20 years old up there and an 8-year-old up there. But when their mum's feeling better at the end of the week, I'll be putting them out. Right? But I want to think about the people that you can't just love them and hand them back. They're yours. And lots of people, like my friend Lorna, she's had to care for twins at the age of 57. And you don't get to hand them back, neither would you want to, but it takes its toll, because at this time in our lives we were thinking of flying out to Spain and sitting there and watching the palm trees, or going to bingo, if that's still a thing. You didn't imagine that you'd be doing what you were doing. But I can honestly say, from a recipient of the quality of care, thank you all. You're not my grandparents, but you're somebody's grandparents, and that makes you stars.
Oh, thank you, Beverley. That's a lovely ending. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop the video now.
Could I just